Married? What a dreamer. The rich man mocked the pregnant waitress. In tears, the girl returned to her native village, unaware of the surprise that awaited her. Are you pregnant? Is that not a joke? Olinda blinked in fear. Yes, she understood that she and Damien had only known each other for 3 months, and the news of the baby might shock him. But not to this extent. Yes, I'm pregnant, Olinda repeated cautiously. Damien looked her up and down, and she suddenly saw contempt in his gray eyes. Damien. He sighed. I love you, Olinda whispered timidly. Damien looked at her one more time and then burst out laughing loudly for the whole cafe to hear. You? Olinda wiped a tear rolling down her cheek. Somewhere inside her, she held on to the hope that this strange reaction was due to shock. Now her beloved would calm down, hug her, and say how happy he was. But his reaction suggested otherwise. Olinda, Damien leaned slightly forward, looking her straight in the eyes. He lowered his voice, presumably so that Olinda's colleagues and cafe patrons wouldn't hear what he was about to say. Are you trying to become my wife? That won't happen. To me, you're just a one-night girl. What? Olinda, horrified, thought she must have misheard. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she didn't even have the strength to wipe them away. Damien sighed and pulled out his wallet. Let's do this, he said, pulling out several large bills and placing them on the table in front of Olinda. If you really have something going on, here's money to solve the problem. If you were trying to trick me, keep the money for your efforts. In any case, you no longer work in this cafe, and I don't want to see you again. Olinda stood up, a huge lump stuck in her chest. She took off the beautiful dark red apron with the cafe logo and threw it on the table right on top of the money. And you won't see me again, she said firmly and left. From work, Olinda went straight home to the small apartment where she rented a room. She quickly packed her things and went to the train station. Fortunately, there was no one in her compartment, and Olinda finally allowed herself to cry properly. Olinda, is that you? Why are you crying? Olinda wiped her face and turned toward the voice. Laura, her former classmate and friend, looked at her with surprise. Former friend because, after graduating from school, Laura moved to another city to attend university. And so it happened that they had hardly been in touch all year. Hi, Laura, Olinda tried to put on the friendliest face she could manage, as if she hadn't just been sobbing uncontrollably. Are you heading to the village? Olinda asked. Laura nodded and sat on the opposite lower bunk. This is my spot, she explained. Finally, the holidays have started, so I decided to visit my family. Olinda tried to smile. That's great. I'm so happy to see you. How's life? How's university? She noticed that her friend looked very well. In school, she had been like a typical plain girl. She wore a long light blonde braid, hardly wore any makeup, just a bit of eyeliner that made her eyes look even bigger. And she was a bit chubby. Now, however, her friend had lost a lot of weight, dyed her hair a light blonde, and had a stylish bob haircut. I'm doing well, Laura replied. I'm studying law, living with my aunt, everything's fine. But what happened with you? We've hardly been in touch. Olinda shrugged. She thought about how terrible she must look right now. Her long chestnut hair was disheveled, and her brown eyes were swollen from crying. I didn't get in, she said quietly. I decided to try again next year. For now, I got a job as a waitress at a cafe and rented a room from a woman. Well, that's great. You're doing well. Olinda gave a sad smile. You're the one who's doing well, and I'm the failure. What? Laura moved from her seat and hugged her friend. Because you didn't get in? Oh, don't be like that. Do you know how many people that happens to? You didn't get in this year, you'll get in next year. You're doing great, working, not just living off your father. I started there in September, Olinda began to tell her friend. I really liked the cafe, The team is young, everyone is cheerful and friendly. I learned everything quickly, the work went well, and the tips are pretty good. See? Laura encouraged her, continuing to gently pat her on the back. So what happened next? A few months ago, I met Damien. Laura frowned. All right. Now, please tell me more about this from that point. I sense there's going to be some drama and suffering here. Despite the situation, Olinda couldn't help but smile a little. That's Laura, always knowing how to make her laugh. Your intuition was spot on, she told her friend. Damien became our new manager. Actually, his father is the owner of the entire cafe chain. He decided that his son needed to gain some experience before taking over the family business when the time comes. I see. And what's he like, this Damien? Handsome? Very. Tall, dark-haired, gray-eyed. At first, he didn't even notice me. Apparently, he was swamped with work. But then, one day, we ended up staying at the cafe late, and he asked me something. I answered. We just started talking. After we closed the cafe, he asked where I lived. I told him. Damien offered to give me a ride, and that's where it all started. So, you started dating? Laura asked for clarification. Not right away. He courted me for a while, drove me home every day. Then he asked me out, took me to restaurants, gave me flowers. I thought he liked me. Here, Olinda started crying again. Laura opened her bag, pulled out a bottle of water, and handed it to her friend. A reasonable thought, she said. Olinda managed to smile through her tears. I was head over heels in love with him by then, she said. No one had ever courted me so beautifully. I understand. And so, we started dating. Or at least, that's what I thought. What do you mean? Laura asked, confused. I thought our relationship was serious. You know, I had never been with anyone before. I know, so what happened next? Of course, we tried not to make our relationship too public at work, but I think everyone figured it out anyway. We dated for several months. Yes, Damien never said he loved me, but I thought. I saw it, I felt it. Isn't that how it usually is? Unfortunately, not always, dear. Continue. Olinda clenched the fabric of her skirt in her fingers. And yesterday, I found out I'm pregnant, she said quietly. Wow. Did you tell him? Yes. What did he say? Olinda bit her lower lip until it bled, trying not to cry again. He laughed at me. He said I was just a one-night girl to him and definitely not a wife. He tried to give me money and said he never wanted to see me again. What a jerk. Laura hugged her friend tightly. Well, forget him. You'll manage without him. Did you leave? Yes. I'm on my way to my father's village. Good. Senor Rufo is a good man, he'll understand everything. Don't worry, Olinda. You'll show him. I'll be in the village all summer, so if you need anything, I'll help. We'll get through this. Olinda wiped the remaining tears, took a sip of water, and smiled. Thank you, Laura. I've missed you so much. I've missed you too. Olinda's mother had passed away. She died in a car accident when Olinda was only 5 years old. The girl hardly remembered her, just a vague image, long, thick dark hair, a soft smile, and gentle hands. Of course, it was not easy for Rufo, the widower, to raise a little girl on his own. The whole family pitched in, his late wife's parents, his own mother, and his older sister. Olinda grew up surrounded by caring and loving relatives. However, a year before she finished school, her aunt got married, moved to the other side of the country, and took her parents with her. Rufo was a good man. He and Maria, Olinda's mother, married when they were both just 18, having loved each other since school. 8 months after their wedding, Olinda was born. Maria worked as a kindergarten teacher, while Rufo was a full-time driver on the farm and, in his free time, crafted wooden items. He could make anything: a table, a cupboard, window trim, wooden toys. After his wife's death, Rufo fell into a deep depression. He would mechanically get up, go to work, come home, and go to bed. Then one day, he suddenly sat at the table, looked up, and met his daughter's eyes. She looked at him with fear and suspicion, as if he were a stranger. That's when Rufo realized that things couldn't go on like this. His daughter, who had recently lost her mother, was left all alone. She wasn't to blame for any of it. He walked around the table and picked up little Olinda. "I'm sorry, little one. How could I lose myself so much and forget that I have a child?" Rufo lifted little Olinda so that her face was level with his eyes. "I promise you, dear," he said, looking her straight in the eyes, "I will never forget you again. You can always rely on me. No matter what happens, I will be on your side." And he kept his promise. Olinda always grew up with the feeling that she had a father she could tell everything to, and he would listen and support her. The only thing she kept from him was her romance with Damien. Olinda was afraid that her father was not ready for the fact that his little girl had grown up, so she kept it hidden. But, of course, now it was time to tell him everything. Rufo didn't know about his daughter's arrival and was therefore very surprised when Olinda walked into the house. "Daughter, you've come," the father exclaimed with joy. "Yes, Daddy. Why didn't you let me know? I would have picked you up." "It's all right. Laura came with me, and her parents drove us here." "That's good, of course." But the father looked at her closely and then asked quietly, "Is something wrong?" Although Olinda was prepared for such a question, she flinched. "Yes, Dad. I'm pregnant." "Is that so?" Rufo said thoughtfully, scratching the back of his head in confusion. "And what's the situation with the baby's father?" "There is no situation." "Are you keeping the baby?" "Yes, Dad." Rufo simply walked over and hugged his daughter. "Are you angry with me?" she asked. "No, dear. We'll manage." News of her pregnancy spread quickly in the village. A couple of weeks after returning home, Olinda went to the district clinic. She needed to register, get an ultrasound, and take tests. Of course, as soon as one of the neighbors saw her at the gynecologist's office, rumors began to spread through the village. Olinda realized this when she went to the store for bread and saw other women whispering to each other. They giggled, glancing at her stomach and almost pointing fingers. "Oh, don't pay any attention to them," Laura told her later, when they went out for a walk together. "Those silly village women. You know that interesting events only happen here once every 5 years." "Well, yes. And here I am, back, pregnant and single." Her friend took her hand. "This is your life and your choice, which concerns no one else." "That's true. Thank you for supporting me. I'm not even worried about myself anymore, but about Dad. He'll be affected too. Senor Rufo will manage." Her friend smiled. "And, maybe you should move to the city and start a new life there?" "Well, where would we move to?" Olinda sighed. "We have our home here, Dad's job. Our roots are here. But you're not planning to spend the rest of your life living with your father and child in the village, are you?" "For now, yes. Of course, I don't want to be a burden to him, but I don't know where I could work in our village. Especially with a small child." Laura pondered. "That's a good question. We need to think about it. For now, I can only offer a position as a librarian. My mom is going to retire soon, and she hasn't found a replacement yet." "Oh, really?" Olinda was delighted. "That would be great. All right, I'll talk to her. By the way, how was your visit to the hospital? How are the tests?" "Everything's fine, with me and the baby. Although, we still don't know if it's a boy or a girl. But I don't mind." Olinda smiled and patted her barely noticeable belly. And what about that scoundrel? Has he shown up? No, Olinda sighed. He hasn't called or written. I tried once, but it seems he blocked my number. What a creep. Laura was so angry that she slammed her fist on the bench they were sitting on. Don't worry, he won't get out of paying child support. I'll help you sort everything out. Thanks, Laura, but I won't be doing that, Olinda said firmly. I don't want his money. Pride, I understand, her friend replied. But it's for the baby. Money is never superfluous. No, I don't want it. All right, I hope you change your mind, Laura sighed. I'll always be ready to take that jerk to task. Sorry, I have to go now. Dad will be home from work soon, and I need to prepare dinner. Okay, see you later. As promised, Laura spoke to her mother. She was very pleased to find a replacement so quickly in the small village, especially someone she had known since childhood. Look, dear, it's not too complicated, she explained to her new hire. You'll need just one day to figure out how everything works. I won't lie, the salary is small, but there isn't much work. Most of the time, retirees or schoolchildren who have reading assignments come in. New book arrivals aren't very frequent, but overall, the selection is good. Olinda quickly got the hang of how the library operated and soon delighted her father by finding a job. Will it be too hard for you? He asked with concern. Dad, what are you talking about? Olinda laughed as she served soup onto plates. All I need to do all day is sit in a cool room, read or watch movies, and occasionally check out books to the rare visitors. It's a dream job. Her father sighed. If you don't want to, you don't have to go. We have enough money. No, Dad, I want to work, and I'm feeling great. All right, daughter, as you say. Since Olinda started working at the library, she noticed that more people were coming in than her friend's mother had mentioned. She quickly figured out the reason for this interest. Mostly, it was women who came in. They pretended to be there for the books, but then tried to steer the conversation towards Olinda's personal life, her future baby, and its father. At first, she was shy and didn't want to offend anyone or be rude, so she tried to avoid the uncomfortable topic. Eventually, her patience ran out, and Olinda started firmly stating that she didn't want to discuss it. Some understood quickly and stopped bringing it up, while others insisted and refused to leave. Did you come for books? Laura once answered for Olinda, who had come to support her friend. Or to gather new gossip? The old woman who was asking the questions looked disapprovingly at Laura, muttering under her breath. Can't ask anything these days. And left without taking any books. Thank you, Olinda smiled gratefully at her friend. I usually handle it. But with some people, you just need to be tougher, Laura replied firmly. I'll try. Well, I'm glad I could drop by. But I need to go to the store now, her friend said. Bye. Once alone, Olinda tidied up the library. She swept the floor, dusted off surfaces, and put the books back in their places. She was about to pick out something new and settle into her comfortable chair with a cup of coffee when the door suddenly opened. Good afternoon, she greeted, surprised to see the new visitor. Firstly, he was a completely unfamiliar man in his 30s. In her village, and even in the neighboring ones, Olinda knew everyone. So he must have been a newcomer. Secondly, he looked like a character who might have accidentally wandered into a library. He was clearly a working man, broad, powerful shoulders, calloused hands, worn-out jeans, and a gray stretched-out t-shirt covered with dark stains either from grease or engine oil. Hello, the stranger responded to Olinda's greeting. He looked around with curiosity and eventually focused his gaze on Olinda herself. Are you here for books? Olinda asked. No, I'd like some French fries and a large cola, the stranger replied in a deep bass voice. Noticing the confusion on Olinda's face, he smiled cheerfully, revealing a row of white, even teeth, and added, Of course, I'm here for a book. This is a library, isn't it? That's right. It's just that you don't look like our typical visitor. Is that so? Just because I'm all dirty, you think I can't read? Olinda decided not to argue and simply asked, "Do you need any recommendations, or would you like to browse on your own?" He snorted. "I'll manage on my own." "All right, then. If you need any help, just ask." The man looked at the shelves with interest. Olinda returned to her spot, leaving the unpleasant visitor to find the books he needed. A few seconds later, she heard him snort in dissatisfaction. "Is there nothing here but vanilla romances for retirees? The thrillers about former special forces are in the next shelf. Take a few steps forward and you'll find them." She was surprised to hear him laugh. 1-1, beauty. Olinda decided to leave that remark uncommented. The visitor wandered around the library for another 15 minutes, then approached her desk with a stack of books. "This is your first time here, isn't it?" Olinda asked. "Indeed. Then I need to register you." "Sure. Will a driver's license work?" "Yes." He placed a document on the desk. That's how Olinda learned that the unpleasant visitor's name was Carlos Leon and that he was 29 years old. "Will you be with us for long?" Olinda asked. "Yep. Don't worry, I'll return everything." When she started recording the books, Olinda noticed that besides a few classics of foreign literature, Carlos had picked out several romance novels. Olinda didn't say anything, but the visitor felt it necessary to comment. "These are for my mom. We recently moved here, and she loves reading, just like I do." "I see. Enjoy your reading." Olinda pushed the books towards him. He took them, but instead of leaving, he paused, studying her. "Are you here every day or on shifts?" Olinda looked at him in surprise. "I'm the only librarian. The working hours are posted on the front door, and we're closed on Saturdays and Sundays." "That's a pity," the man suddenly sighed. "I would have been glad to see you every day." "Oh." Olinda managed to reply. "Come by and bring your mom." "Definitely." He glanced at her one more time and left, leaving Olinda with mixed feelings. The days passed almost unnoticed, each one similar to the last. The weather was warm and sunny, and every day for Olinda felt like the previous one. Her father woke up earlier than she did to collect milk from the villages and deliver it to the farm. Olinda herself woke up later, had a leisurely breakfast, and went to work. The days at the library dragged on sleepily and monotonously. The excitement in the village about her pregnancy had faded, and now the library saw only bored retirees, children, and occasional book lovers. At least once every couple of days, Laura came by to visit her at work. She often brought something delicious with her. "I'm getting a part-time job starting in September," Laura announced cheerfully. "At a law firm. I'll be going there after classes and on weekends." "Oh, that's great. What position?" "Something between a secretary and a personal assistant. Obviously, I don't know much yet and will be doing the simplest tasks, answering phones, sorting documents, and so on. But still, it's money and, most importantly, experience." "Congratulations. You're amazing," Olinda replied. "I'm also planning to start preparing for college entrance exams in September. I'll give birth in January and try to enroll in July." "That's great. Where are you thinking of going?" "Probably to veterinary school. I'll study part-time and then find a job around here and live with my dad and the baby." "Do you want to stay here?" Olinda shrugged. "For now, yes. We'll see what happens." "Oh, Olinda, what about men and marriage? Look around, who will you find in our village? Look at the locals, either they're lowlifes, or drunks, or a combination of both." "Laura." "And what, Laura?" The friend shrugged innocently. "I'm just speaking the truth." Although, Laura suddenly squinted mischievously and looked at her friend. "We've got a handsome newcomer here, who just arrived recently." Olinda laughed. "Who are you talking about?" "I don't know much about him. Just some businessman." It seems he came here to boost agriculture. He's going to build some kind of enterprise. He settled in a new house on the edge of the village, built especially for his arrival. He brought his mother with him, but no wife. Oh, Laura, I don't need any suitors. Really? Suddenly, a mocking male voice came from behind them. And here I was hoping to win the heart of the local librarian beauty. Startled, the girls turned around. The very visitor whose last encounter with Olinda hadn't gone smoothly was looking at them with a smirk. See? He raised his hand higher, showing a bag of books. I came to return these, and it turns out I'm being discussed. Laura replied completely shamelessly, examining Carlos without any embarrassment. Olinda, on the other hand, wanted to sink into the ground from embarrassment. So, are you really not married? Her friend asked. Laura. The man just smiled. No, my curious ladies. I'm completely single. But since we're having such an honest conversation, I must disappoint you. Marriage is definitely not on my agenda for the near future. He turned to Olinda and spoke to her. As your charming friend correctly noted, I came to your village to do business, not to start romances with local milkmaids and librarians. Olinda blushed from head to toe. Will you be taking the books? Carlos asked. Of course, Olinda replied, retrieving his library card and pulling the desk towards herself. Mentally, she wanted to hit the most oversized book she could find on the head of this impudent man. What did he think of himself? Not needed at all. And Laura wasn't any better. What kind of friend is that? Although, she had always been like this. Are you going to borrow new ones? Olinda asked. Definitely. Carlos walked towards the shelves. Besides, your library isn't as dull as I initially thought. We're actually a lot of fun here, Laura chimed in. You'll definitely enjoy it. He just snorted. This time Carlos was choosing books faster, and the friend stayed silent. Only after Olinda had recorded the new batch and the man had left could she finally breathe a sigh of relief. I told you, Laura said cheerfully. Not married, handsome, promising. What more could you want? When Carlos left the library and got into his car, he suddenly realized he was still smiling. The little librarian was amusing. Although she hardly spoke and just stood there blushing, his mood had improved after visiting the library. He had already heard from his local workers the gossip about Olinda. They said she wasn't smart enough for college, so she went to the city supposedly to find a job, but came back pregnant and tail between her legs. Obviously, now her father would have to carry her and the child on his back for the rest of his life. Despite this, Carlos liked Olinda. There was something special about her. Even he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Although he was experienced with women, after all, he had been married twice. His first wife and first love was a classmate and neighbor named Christina. Carlos had known her for as long as he could remember. Their lives were quite similar. Both grew up in poor families, lived in similar small apartments. Christina had a mother and father and a younger sister. Carlos had only his mother. Christina and Carlos went to school together, played in the yard after classes. And they both always knew they would marry when they grew up. And so it happened. As soon as they turned 18, they had a small, quiet wedding with only their closest people present. They moved into a dorm room provided by Carlos's university. Both studied, and after classes, Carlos unloaded freight cars while Christina cooked dinner, cleaned, and waited for her husband. Despite their poverty and everyday challenges, the young couple was absolutely happy. Carlos promised Christina every day that everything would be fine. He would do everything to ensure they were happy and lacked nothing. And Christina believed him. Carlos did not let her down. After 5 years, they moved into their own apartment. Then they bought one car, then another. When Christina said she no longer wanted to work, Carlos supported her. At first, she took care of the house, then said she wanted to hire a helper to have more time for herself. Her husband did not object. He himself worked almost all the time, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. And somehow, he missed the moment when he and his wife began to drift apart. One day, Carlos came home to find that all of Christina's belongings were gone. She had simply left him a note saying she could no longer bear it, that she was tired of being alone, and that she had recently met another man and no longer saw the point in deceiving her husband. For Carlos, this was a terrible blow. Until that moment, he had been sure that he was doing everything for his wife, for their future, for their family, and possibly for their children. Now everything seemed to lose its meaning. His mother came and helped him, shaking him as she had done when he was a child. She told him to live for himself, not for others. Essentially, she gave him a push. Carlos felt like he had found a second wind and began to work with renewed strength. Just a few years later, Carlos became the youngest successful businessman in his city. It was during this time that he met his second wife, Amada. They met at a party, or rather, Amada approached him first. Carlos had never met women like her before, vibrant, fashionable, bold, and confident. They were the ones who made the first move and boldly stated what they wanted. Their romance quickly blossomed, and within a month, Carlos proposed to Amada. Later, Carlos learned that his mother was against such a quick wedding, but she respected her son's choice and said nothing. This time, the wedding was bright and lavish. Of course, Carlos didn't care much for such extravagance, but Amada wanted it, and he was willing to do everything she wished. The first month after the wedding was simply wonderful. Carlos and his young wife went on a long, beautiful vacation to the islands. He was convinced that he had hit the jackpot and had finally met someone he was ready to spend his entire life with. However, after they returned home, things quickly began to change, and not for the better. Carlos continued to work, while Amada spent his money. Before their marriage, she had worked as a model. And even now, it seemed she was going to some shoots. Overall, Carlos didn't mind that she didn't work and was willing to support her spending. But as the months went by, it seemed more and more to him that Amada was only interested in his money. Initially, she had been interested in him, wanted to spend more time together, but now she always had some excuse. And she was affectionate with Carlos only when she needed money. Carlos noticed all this and genuinely wanted to improve his relationship with his wife. One day, he even left work early to surprise her. But it turned out that she had a surprise for him. When he found Amada with another man in his bed, he just turned around and left to avoid doing something foolish. He returned to the apartment only once, just to collect his things. He left the apartment to her, simply unable to imagine going back there. His mother supported him in this decision. "I want to start fresh," Carlos told his mother. "No more parties, no more models, no more hasty relationships. As you wish. And what do you want to do now?" "I want to move far away to a village where there are only a few people and no pretty, money-hungry girls." "I will go with you," his mother said resolutely. And so they ended up in the village. Both Carlos and his mother enjoyed it very much. A large, comfortable, well-equipped house was built for them on the outskirts. His mother took care of the home, while Carlos immersed himself in his new venture. He decided to build a farm there, large, modern, and eco-friendly. And then there was Olinda. He had seen her only twice, but he already understood that he wanted to continue this acquaintance. What nonsense! Carlos scolded himself. As if 2 wives weren't enough, now I'm paying attention to some librarian. Of course, Olinda was completely unaware of the young businessman's emotional turmoil. And she had more pressing concerns. Summer was over, her only friend Laura had moved to another city to study and work, and Olinda was left alone. Well, there was still her father. Over these months, they had developed a special bond. He had never once reproached his daughter with words or a look. He never asked who the father of the child was, where he was, or if Olinda wanted to reconnect with him. One day, Olinda came home from work and saw her father working on a baby cradle. "Dad, but it's still too early," she said. Rufo looked up at his daughter and smiled. I can't wait for the little one to arrive, he said. For the first time in years, I feel so alive. Really? Olinda asked. I thought you were angry with me, but just didn't show it. Angry? Her father asked, surprised. Angry about what? Olinda lowered her eyes. For not going to college, for coming back to the village, for bringing shame upon you and being a burden. Rufo sighed, set aside his tools, and approached his daughter, hugging her. You are the best in the world, he said firmly. And if there's a fool who doesn't understand that, I can only pity him. Everything will be fine with you, and with my grandchild too. Olinda decided not to find out the baby's gender before the birth. What difference did it make if it was a boy or a girl? As long as the baby was healthy and strong. Thank you, Dad, Olinda replied, hugging him back. I don't know how I would manage without you. You would manage, her father said confidently. You're very strong, just like your mother, only you don't yet realize that strength. Their family idyll was interrupted by Rufo's phone ringing. He answered the call, talked for a few minutes, and then turned to his daughter. I need to deliver an order. If you want, you can come with me. The weather is warm today. Sure. What's the order? A dining table and several chairs. They went out to the yard to the old truck that her father used to transport furniture. Olinda saw that it already had a neatly packed dining set. The table and chairs were simply designed but very beautiful. There were no unnecessary ornate details, just flawlessly smooth lacquered wood and straight lines. Wow! Olinda said as they got into the truck. Usually, when someone from the village orders furniture from you, they ask for something fancier and richer, with lace and patterns. But this is simple, modern, and stylish. Rufo started the engine. The client wanted it this way, he replied. She said she wanted something as simple as possible. I drew it up, showed it to her. She said it was exactly what she needed. It was only when they stopped in front of the new, freshly built house that Olinda realized where they had arrived. The client was probably Carlos's mother. Indeed, as soon as they opened the gates, a beautiful, slender woman emerged. She looked around 40, although she should have been much older. Good afternoon, Rufo, she said, smiling warmly at him. And you brought your daughter? Hello, Daria. Yes, I decided to bring her along. Perhaps you know Olinda, she works as our librarian. Olinda greeted her as well, and Daria smiled warmly at her. Yes, I've heard about you. My son has been bringing interesting books for the second time now. He just has good taste, Olinda replied. Actually, we don't have a very large selection. How nice. At least someone has said something good about me. Came the familiar voice of Carlos from behind. Olinda turned around. I've never said anything bad about you. Today he was again in his work attire. His hands, shirt, and face were smeared with something black. But he was smiling. Whether he was genuinely pleased to see her or it was just another opportunity to tease her, she wasn't sure. Meanwhile, Rufo and Daria had already gone to the truck. Son, Daria called. Come and see how lovely it is. Coming, Mom, Carlos replied. He didn't want to move away from Olinda. It was strange, as soon as he saw her, all the dissatisfaction that had built up over the last few days due to minor troubles seemed to dissipate. Is your father a good craftsman? He asked, to pass the time and continued talking with her. Olinda blushed. You'll see for yourself. She was the first to walk over to the truck bed, exactly what Carlos had been aiming for. He followed her. Wow, Rufo. This is beautiful. I didn't expect such quality from a self-taught village craftsman. Carlos, how shameful of you. His mother scolded, giving him a light slap on the hand. Oh, Mom. Olinda couldn't help but smile, and Rufo responded. Daria, your son is right. I do live in the village and haven't had any formal training, so yes, I'm a self-taught craftsman. I'm not ashamed of it at all. I'm very glad you liked our work. Well, maybe we should try it out right away, Mom? Carlos suggested. Together with the esteemed craftsman and our lovely librarian? That's a wonderful idea. Daria exclaimed happily. Stay with us for dinner. No, really. Rufo protested. It's too much trouble. I insist. Olinda saw Daria take her father's hand and look at him pleadingly with her large, bright green eyes, just like Carlos's. Does Dad really like her? She thought. Though, there was nothing surprising about it. Tall, strong, and looking younger than his years, Rufo was attractive to many women. Many unmarried women and widows, not only in the village but throughout the area, had tried to catch his eye, but Olinda's father had been indifferent to them. Now, he looked at his daughter with hesitation, as if asking for her permission. We can stay, if it's not too much trouble for you, Olinda said. Great. Carlos responded unexpectedly cheerfully. Then we'll unload everything now. He and Olinda's father started working with the furniture, while Daria, putting her arm around Olinda's shoulders, led her into the house. Let's go, let the men work. I'll show you the house. If it's not too much trouble, Olinda replied. Daria waved her hand. Oh, don't worry about it, I'd be delighted. We've only just arrived and haven't really met anyone yet. I'd be happy to make new friends. Olinda smiled. I'm also very glad to meet you. The interior of the house surprised her. Olinda had expected many expensive and useless things, but everything was very simple and functional. There was a large, spacious kitchen with huge windows and wooden cabinetry matching the dining set Rufo had made. In the large living room, there were many plants, 3 bookshelves, a sofa, a couple of armchairs, and a piano. It seems you have more books than in my entire library, Olinda remarked. Daria waved her hand. Half of them are about agriculture, Carlos ordered them. Oh. Olinda was surprised. He takes everything so seriously. Indeed. If Carlos wants something, he will make it happen. The women went to the kitchen and started serving dinner onto plates. By that time, the men had already brought in the table and arranged the chairs around it. As a result, Carlos and Daria ended up sitting on one side of the table, Rufo sat across from Daria, and Olinda sat across from the agriculture book enthusiast. Oh, we're having my favorite chicken cutlets with mashed potatoes for dinner, Carlos exclaimed. Olinda couldn't help but smile. It was amusing to see that this city businessman was delighted by such simple things. In fact, her opinion of Carlos had improved slightly for the first time since their meeting. It's probably because of his lovely mother, Olinda thought. You cook wonderfully, Rufo said. Daria blushed. Thank you. I've gotten used to only my son trying my cooking. I'm glad to hear your unbiased opinion. Olinda suddenly noticed her dad blushing too. It seems they like each other, she thought with surprise. This is the first time I remember anyone liking Dad after Mom. I should help him. Olinda decided to buy some time. Daria, may I ask you an impertinent question? Of course. What do you do in your free time? Daria seemed to be expecting a different question because she almost imperceptibly let out a relieved sigh. At first, when we moved, I was busy with the house. Now, of course, most things are ready. I mostly indulged in books. You should come visit us sometime, Olinda suggested. You can see Dad's workshop. Oh, we'll definitely come with my son, Daria replied. Mom, I wasn't invited, Carlos suddenly interjected, casting a sly look at Olinda. The girl was annoyed. Is he making fun of me? He just started behaving properly. She had just opened her mouth to respond to the impudent man when her father beat her to it. Carlos, of course, we'd be happy to see both of you. I may not cook as deliciously as Daria, but I'll try to surprise you. Carlos tilted his head. I'm sorry, Rufo, that was just a silly joke on my part. My mother and I would be delighted to visit you. As he said this, Carlos looked at Olinda, who was trying to maintain a neutral expression. Is she angry that I'm coming? Carlos thought, or does she not care? What kind of girl is she? You can never tell what she's thinking. The next visit from Daria and Carlos happened the following week. Olinda saw how anxious her father was. Their house and yard were always clean, but this time he scrubbed everything to a shine, even without his daughter's help. Dad, let me help, Olinda said. You're pregnant, you shouldn't strain yourself, Rufo replied. It's only the 5th month. Only? It's still a whole month. I can manage on my own. The lunch was also prepared by Rufo himself. He was skilled at it. There was stew, a fresh vegetable salad, and raspberry pie. Daria enjoyed everything very much. You were being modest, she told Rufo. You cook splendidly. He shrugged modestly. Would you like me to show you my workshop? I'd love to, Daria replied, turning to her son. Carlos, are you coming with us? No, I'll just have another piece of pie. Olinda guessed that he had also noticed the budding connection between his mother and her father, and she was pleased internally that Carlos didn't mind. I'll pour you more coffee, she said, getting up from the table. Her parents went outside, and Carlos smiled slyly. So you've noticed that they're drawn to each other too? Olinda set a cup in front of him. Yes, I know my father too well. He's never behaved like this with a woman before. How so? He's shy, trying to impress her, making an effort to connect, wanting to spend more time with her. Carlos nodded, indicating that he understood everything. Can I ask you a few personal questions? I'm just worried about my mother. You can. He cleared his throat awkwardly. How long has your dad been single? For a long time, many years. He was focused on raising me, so he didn't have time for women. After Mom, he never got involved with anyone, not even tried. Although, he's still very young. I see. And you? Carlos hesitated. Olinda blushed but decided to clarify the situation. She clenched the kitchen towel in her hands, looked Carlos in the eyes, and said, I was just very foolish. I thought that the person I loved also loved me. He said that I was just a toy for him. Olinda squeezed the towel even tighter and felt the rough fabric digging into her fingertips. I decided that I wanted to keep the baby. I quit my job and came back to the village. My dad supported me. If you're worried about your mother's future, don't be. I won't always live with him. I'll find a new job, and my baby and I will move away. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, Carlos replied. And you're really brave for making such a decision. I admire that. As for work, I can help. Olinda looked at him skeptically. Really? Of course. My farm will be starting up soon. I'm not asking you to take care of animals or drive a tractor, of course. But, for example, you could work as a sales clerk in my organic store or help me with paperwork. Olinda smiled uncertainly. That would be great. Rufo and Daria's relationship was slowly but surely developing. After so many years, they had both forgotten how to build a relationship and took their first steps toward each other hesitantly and cautiously. Their children observed from the sidelines but tried not to interfere. Besides, they had their own affairs. Olinda felt that it was becoming more difficult for her with each month of pregnancy. She was preparing her room for the baby, while Carlos focused on the farm. The construction of all the buildings was completed, the equipment was set up, and workers were hired. But many other processes still needed to be organized. Olinda was arranging books in the library when she heard Carlos's voice behind her. Are you ever going on maternity leave? According to my calculations, you should have given birth about 5 weeks ago. She laughed and turned around. Math has failed you, they're due in 2 weeks at the end of January. Wow. But still, I think people usually go on maternity leave earlier. I wanted to, but they couldn't find a replacement for me. So they asked me to work as long as I can, and then maybe Laura's mom will come. Well, at least that's something. And you're here for the books? Yes, I need to kill some time. My mom is hosting dinner for your father tonight. Olinda smiled. Right, I completely forgot. If you'd like, I can treat you to dinner. I'd be happy to accept your offer. What's for dinner? Whatever you help me prepare. She suddenly fell silent and touched her stomach. Carlos noticed her face contorting as if in pain. Is everything okay? Yes. Are you sure? My stomach hurts, Olinda admitted. It's been happening more often lately. I try not to pay attention to it. Why don't you sit down and rest a bit? And if it doesn't pass in 15 minutes, we'll go to the hospital. Olinda tried to laugh, but at that moment she felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen and gasped in pain. Sit down, Carlos said firmly. Olinda complied. She closed her eyes and tried to calm down, but the pain seemed to intensify. That's it, Carlos said decisively. We're going to the hospital. No need. Yes, Olinda. He helped her to his car. Sorry, it's not a Mercedes, Carlos joked, but on these roads, I can only drive this old SUV. Olinda tried to laugh, but again only gasped in pain. Carlos suddenly felt a sharp pang of fear for the first time. Everything will be fine, he said, either to Olinda or to himself. We'll get there quickly. Throughout the drive, he kept glancing at her. I should have taken her right away instead of waiting those 15 minutes, Carlos thought. Asterisk, what if I'm too late? Is it normal for her to be in so much pain? Asterisk. In the emergency room of the district hospital, he was quickly reassured. Father, everything is fine, said a short, plump woman in her 50s wearing a white coat. You did well bringing her in, but we still have plenty of time. Is she okay? Carlos asked anxiously. Where did they take her? To the labor room. Do you want to stay with her or go home? I'm staying with her. The doctor nodded as if she expected no other answer. Then come with me. Carlos suddenly realized that it hadn't even occurred to him to say that he wasn't the father of the baby and that he was just a good acquaintance to Olinda. But he couldn't leave her here alone. He wouldn't have forgiven himself for that. Well, she's in labor. Didn't it occur to you all this time to call me or Rufo? We were nearly going out of our minds. Carlos couldn't even remember the last time his mother had yelled at him. Even when he was a teenager and did all the stupid things boys his age do, Daria always preferred to talk calmly rather than raise her voice. But now his mother was simply furious. She said that when she and Rufo found out that neither Olinda nor Carlos was home and neither was answering the phone, they didn't know what to think. Carlos sighed with relief. The baby is a girl, 3 kilos 200 grams, 50 centimeters. It seemed like it lasted forever, but the doctor said that's about how long the first labor takes. And that everything went very well. Thank God. We'll come to you today. No need, Carlos weakly protested. You don't need to, his mother cut him off, but Olinda and the baby will need a lot of things. We'll be there in a couple of hours. Okay, Mom. When the call ended, Carlos peeked into the room. Olinda was sleeping, and next to her, the baby was dozing in a crib. Carlos carefully walked past them, sat in a chair, and leaned back. His gaze inevitably lingered on Olinda. She looked so tired, yet so calm. Dark circles lay under her large eyes, and her long eyelashes twitched slightly in her sleep. She looked so fragile, and Carlos suddenly found himself thinking that he wanted to be by her side all the time and protect her and her baby. He didn't regret for a moment agreeing to stay with her through these long, agonizing hours. It was as if he and Olinda had become closer during these months of acquaintance than ever before. Are you still here? Came Olinda's weak voice. Carlos smiled. Sorry for waking you. No, it's okay, I'm awake. Do you want me to leave? Olinda shook her head quickly, but then seemed to be embarrassed by her own reaction. You need to rest, she said. Just like you. I'm already lying in bed. Our parents will be here in a couple of hours. Oh, did you call them when we arrived? Carlos blushed. To be honest, I forgot about that. Mom only reached me recently. Oh, they must be worried about us. Yes. Olinda smiled. Well, that's okay. Dad will be happy to have a granddaughter. Carlos also picked up Olinda from the hospital. He suddenly realized that he wanted her and Bonita to go straight to his house, but he knew he couldn't ask her to do that. At home, Rufo and Daria greeted them. They spent some time together, and then it was time to head back. The entire way home, Carlos was silent. Missing them already? His mother suddenly asked. He flinched. What do you mean? Daria smiled. Do you think I don't see what's happening? You've been in love with Olinda for a long time. No. Yes. Mom, where did you get that idea? Daria started listing reasons, folding her fingers. You constantly talk about her, you care for her, you look for any excuse to touch her. And I saw your face when we were leaving. You clearly wanted to take Olinda and the baby with you so you wouldn't have to part from them. Carlos gripped the steering wheel tightly. I'm scared, Mom, he suddenly confessed. I've already made 2 mistakes and I don't want to repeat them. Daria smiled gently and took her son's hand. Have those been mistakes, dear? Or did you just gain necessary experience? I was very afraid of making a mistake, so after your father, I didn't even try to meet anyone else. Mom, Carlos squeezed her hand in return. Thank you for your support, but I need time. I hope you have it. Olinda is a wonderful girl, don't let her slip away. So, how are you managing with the baby? Carlos asked when he visited Olinda a few days later. She had just put Bonita to sleep and was now sitting with her guest in the kitchen. It varies, Olinda admitted honestly. I still can't quite believe that I've actually become a mother. Carlos smiled. Yes, I can't even imagine it. Aren't you bored during the day while your father is at work? Oh, not at all, there's plenty to do. How are things with you? Overall, everything is fine. But I'm realizing more and more that I need a personal assistant. I need to communicate with suppliers, answer their emails, sort through my mail, and all that. Maybe I can help you a bit later. The baby is sleeping most of the time right now anyway. No, I couldn't ask you to do that. Olinda smiled slyly. But you promised me a job. But not a week after giving birth. I need the work. If you haven't noticed, our parents have grown quite close. And it seems that Dad is thinking about asking Daria to live with us soon. He just hasn't made up his mind yet. Oh, was all Carlos could manage to say. An idea suddenly popped into his head. You know, we could help them. How? You and Bonita could move into our house. I work remotely anyway, the farm is nearby. You could help me, and we can move Mom in with your father. Olinda looked at him intently. Are you really doing this to get our parents together? Of course, Carlos lied without blinking. In his mind, he added, not at all, because I want you to be close to me all the time. This is the most unexpected proposal of my life. Olinda admitted. I understand, but think about it. You'd be living in a large, well-equipped house where you don't have to keep lighting the stove to warm water for bathing. You can wash diapers in a washing machine, the house is always warm, and there's no manual labor. Plus, you'll have a job with a good salary, so you can start saving for the future. And if it means anything to you, I'll always be around to help. Olinda stood up, turned away, and went to her room. Supposedly to check on Bonita, but in reality, she just didn't want Carlos to see her flushed cheeks. Could she really live with him under the same roof? It was clear that he was offering this out of kindness and to make his mother happy. But still. I agree, she announced when she returned. I just need to get my father's and your mother's opinions. Daria and Rufo, contrary to their children's concerns, quickly agreed. Within a day, the women had moved into their new homes. Daria promised to visit every day. "I'll also try to visit you more often," said her father. Olinda smiled. "Don't worry, we'll manage. Carlos promised to help if needed. I have no doubts about that. He looks at you so." Olinda blushed. "How?" "Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, you will soon." He didn't say anything more. Olinda, having spent a few days in the new house, suddenly realized that she felt quite comfortable. Of course, Carlos worked a lot, but he dedicated all his free time to her and Bonita. "Have you eaten today? How many hours did you sleep during the day? Are there enough groceries?" Olinda laughed. "Actually, I should be taking care of you." "Why is that?" "Well, I'm the woman and I stay at home while you work." Olinda laughed as she said this. "What about it? It sounds funny, like we're husband and wife." Carlos picked up Bonita, who had just woken up, and started rocking her. "So what?" he said in a perfectly even tone. "I'm fine with that. Life doesn't work like that." He was silent for a few minutes. The baby fell back asleep, and he placed her in the crib. Only then did he quietly ask, "How doesn't it work?" "Like this, for us to just meet, become friends, and then live together. Especially with me having a child. You know, I haven't felt this happy in a long time. It's like I've spent my whole life trying to achieve something, proving to everyone how cool, strong, and smart I am. And how good I am at making money. But no matter what I did, no matter how high I reached, I never felt truly happy. And then, imagine my amazement when I come to a small village and meet a fragile young woman living a calm, quiet life. I start talking to you and realize that you're much braver and stronger than I am. I'm not like that. You are. You're amazing. So fragile on the outside and so strong on the inside. You never complain or hold grudges. At first, I behaved terribly, but you were still kind and open with me. And your warmth thawed me. I believe that my mother and I are here for a reason. She found her happiness in your father, a wonderful man. And the more time I spend with you and Bonita, the more I realize that I've also found my happiness. Carlos." He stood in front of her and continued, "If you say that you don't feel anything for me, I'll understand. You and Bonita can live in this house as long as you want. I'll still help you in any way I can. And I'll treat you like my best friend. But if there's even the slightest chance..." Carlos, she crumpled a clean diaper in her hands, a stack of which lay on the back of a chair. "I like you very much too," she said. "And I was scared to admit it even to myself. Because you know my story. And after being betrayed by someone I thought was my first love, I thought I'd never be able to trust men again. And then you came along, and I got scared. It's only been a short time. Besides, to be honest, I didn't like you very much at first. You even scared me a bit. But then, as I got to know you better, I saw more and more how the real Carlos, who loves his mother and is spoken of well by his employees, emerges from the outward appearance of Carlos. And, of course, how caring and kind you are towards me. That's a separate topic. So, you're not indifferent to me either?" "Well, yes." "Then maybe we should just leave our lives as they are?" "I agree." Rufo took a few steps back. "All set?" Daria asked. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder, and Rufo softly took her hand and kissed her fingers. "Yes, you can let the cat go. Let's do it. Where are our kids?" "We're here." Olinda was holding a calico cat, and Bonita was sitting on Carlos's arms. She had just turned 2.5 years old and was curiously exploring the world. "Grandma and Grandpa," she exclaimed joyfully upon seeing Rufo and Daria. "Hello, little one," said Rufo. "Do you want to let the cat into Grandma and Grandpa's new house?" asked Daria. "Yes," the girl shouted happily. "Then let's go." Carlos lowered his daughter. Olinda handed the cat to the girl, and Bonita, along with Grandma and Grandpa, went into the house. Carlos embraced his wife's shoulders. "So, what are our plans for today?" Olinda raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Well, our daughter will surely stay here to spend the night." "Probably. Maybe we can think about giving her a brother or sister." Olinda laughed. "I like your suggestion." "Perhaps, yes. We need to hurry before our parents get ahead of us." "Do you think they might surprise us like that?" "Quite possibly." Carlos pretended to think. "And I like the idea of having a brother or sister. What matters to me is that we're all happy." "Me too, my love."